In the green room, we decided, we drew straws, and I get to try to say the title of this episode, Arma Enim Silent Leges. That's Texan for, I don't know what that means. But
Means.
what does it mean?
It means in times of war, the law goes silent.
Great. That certainly happened in this episode. There was so much going on in this episode. I hardly know where to begin. Section 31, Admiral Ross, of course, Dr. Bashir. We really got a sense of his genetic enhancement here and what that brings to his abilities as a physician, scientist, whatever it is. That was a big part of it, although certainly understated. The interactions with the Romulans were a huge, obviously, part of this. The Tal Shiar, the interplay between the Federation and Romulan allies and enemies, and how at the end, I just love the scene with Admiral Ross and Bashir. Structurally, this was a detective story for me. And whether it was a novel that I read or a video recreation of Jean Le Carré's story, where every turn was not a misstep, but misdirection. And the players were known or unknown to each other. And the manipulation was just fabulous to the point where essentially a Federation ally of some note was executed or will be executed off screen because of what the Federation in the form of Dr. Bashir got her to do. And she has been a friend of the Federation through the limited time we've known her in DS9 after the Romulans came into the war against the Dominion. So it really showed the depth of what the Federation was willing to do for its longer term interest and to protect its assets in the form of the head of the Tal Shiar, who they had apparently turned. Just deliciously evil, nefarious, dark. You have a spy who, of course, just appears and disappears at will without even any computer records. Going forward, a misplay by Admiral Ross to both Captain Sisko and Bashir. As interesting as I found the talk with Admiral Ross at the end, I was even, I won't say more interested, but equally interested by the talk at the start of the show with the Section 13 representative Sloan and Bashir. And he was able to play upon Bashir's, not his fears, but his ego. And it was essentially, you want to do this. And you didn't yell because you want this. And you want to be a spy. And you want to be James Bond. And that's pretty cool. But he was able to manipulate Bashir in that manner because Bashir didn't take much. Maybe it wasn't even one manipulation. Maybe Bashir wanted to do that all along. Lots going on here. I can't wait to hear your views and see where we can take all this. Murphy, what do you got for us on this one?
Yeah, I like that you described this as a sort of mystery novel. This is totally like a spy noir vibe the whole way through. It's neat because it's the last sort of real episode of DS9 before we go into the sort of penumbra and the arc that leads to the end. And it's kind of nice that they sort of ended on this note of the creeping sort of demoralization of the Federation. He says at the end, in times of the title of the episode, in times of war, the law falls silent. Bashir retorts to him and says, that's what we've become, a 24th century Rome where Caesar can do no wrong. And it's interesting that this whole story is played against the backdrop of the Romulans. And we see the Federation creeping towards that sort of Romulan style authoritarianism. This is going to play out again in Insurrection plays heavily into stuff that laid out in this episode and stuff at Picard later on. This is like an ongoing thing with the Federation, the slide into the ends justify the means. That's a very different animal from what we've seen before. But yeah, I think it's funny. They're sort of becoming the new Romulan Empire in a way. And it's just so perfect. Like Bashir just plays that like I said, he wants to be a spy, but he wants to be a spy with a conscience and heart of gold. And he can't do that. And several people in this episode remind him of that, and he doesn't listen. And inadvertently, through his woundishness, he ends up getting this poor woman killed. Kind of a tragedy, but yeah, he's a bit of a goof. He needs to listen to people more. And you're right, he totally had his ego played upon, and that's the end result.
Megan?
Yeah, I think he was played as, well, Murphy, we were chatting about the show before, and he was played like a harp by everyone involved, and he really did try to be the spy with a heart of gold. And like, as soon as he was contacted by Section 31, he goes to his superior officer and reports it. And he was also played by Starfleet, like a harp. And it's easy to pull, I guess it's easy to pull the wool over the eyes of and manipulate someone who's very aware of their own cleverness and also very aware of their own morals. So they just played him. And I had a couple of questions about the episode. One is, I didn't quite understand why Starfleet would want Senator Krtak to be disempowered. She seemed like a real friend to the Alliance. So I'd love to discuss that more and get your takes on it. But I think the other thing that got me the most about Bashir was his outrage and what he didn't know about what had happened previously. Because I kept thinking about In the Pale Moonlight. And as he's raging at Admiral Ross about Ross's dereliction of morals, he never knew what Sisko had done to get the Romulans into the Alliance. And he didn't know what Garak had done. His best friend, his boyfriend, and his mentor, his superior officer, they were doing terrible things that brought this about as well. And now he's being unwittingly drawn into it. And I just wonder if that conversation had happened. I know it couldn't for plot reasons, but yeah, what he didn't know and the conversations that didn't happen hit me almost as hard as the ones that did. So that was my big takeaway, is this unknown betrayal that's just like hanging in the air that I found really heavy.
He knows something's up, right? Because Sisko asked him to get that, what is it? Medic gel or whatever it is. And he's, this stuff is super dangerous and illegal. I need to know what it's for. And Sisko's, I'm not going to tell you squat, and I'm going to give you a direct order. And he's, I want this in writing, and I'm going to lodge a protest with the Federation Council because this is a huge ethics violation. You can't just grab this stuff and give it to some random dude. So Bashir definitely knows that there's.
But unless I'm forgetting, he doesn't know exactly what.
No, I don't think he does. I don't think Sisko lets anybody in on the joke.
And I'm not surprised that Garak didn't tell him either, but it hurts a little because they're bros.
Yeah, I think Garak's a little more subtle than that. He tries to warn him and against all kinds of stuff in the beginning, and Bashir is, I'm an optimist, so I'm going to do good things, and Garak's going to blow up in your face.
Senator Krtak, she had to be removed because she was the patriotic Romulan with the potential to be elevated to the council. And although she sees the Alliance now as something in the interest of Romulus, they don't believe long-term she will see that, and that she will revert to a much more homophobic or Romulan-phobic or Romulan-centric, I guess, view of the galaxy. But now I have a question listening to you guys. Is Sisko in on this too?
Oh.
The play in Romulus and the home world. Do you think he's in with Ross on this?
Yes.
Oh.
Stay. Go ahead. Tell me why you don't think he is. He just cares.
I think, and my take is he walked as close to the edge as he was willing to go. I think he did his part. He did his bit. And I think he wouldn't go any further in that kind of shady subterfuge way. I think it was hard on him. I think it really permanently damaged a part of him. And I don't think he would continue.
Well,
Murphy?
I think he's in on it. I think he works with Ross very closely. He's basically leading the war at this point. His sort of insistence on sending Julie into this conference to be like, oh, do it to get information on Section 31. Yeah, I think Sisko was sort of, if he's not directly involved, he's definitely nudging him out the door in that direction. Like he's taking Julie into the park and he's go play with the other kids and he's just like patting him on the back. giving him the sort of courage he
Maybe
needs.
I'm
to
the
be like,
naive optimist here.
yeah, I'm kind of a cynic, but I think
Kind
Cisco is, that's it. I think, see, what does he say? I take after my mother is a line that I used to use on her, and they use it in this episode. I see the cloud in every silver lining. Yeah, I don't trust the motives of Starfleet at this.
I have two minor points I want to raise, almost Easter egg points. The first was the change in Starfleet dress uniform. I really liked the white uniform. I thought that was incredibly sharp. But Romulan ale. And
love
apparently
that.
Ross had partaken. He needed to sit down with Scotty and have Scotty just give him a session on how to drink a bottle of Romulan ale. So I enjoyed that because we've heard of that all the way back to Star Trek, the original series, and throughout the entire 50-year history of Star Trek. So I thought that was pretty cool to have that reference as well. What did you think about the trial scene where the accusations were made? Kretak freely admitted she did attempted to access the Tal Shiar records. Bashir freely admitted or openly admitted what he, not freely, but openly admitted his part in it. And then Kovac filled in a little bit more before they brought Sloan in. Was there any other action the council possibly could have taken? We're dealing with Romulans. We're in the middle of a war, or because of their nature, you knew that was going to be the outcome. They were going to imprison or execute the Romulan, that certainly the spy would be executed, but the Starfleet officer not accused of espionage, or at least given some credit for telling the truth, or telling his story rather, would be allowed to return home. Was that the only option really available to the scriptwriters?
I guess so. I would think it would have been on brand for the Romulans to also punish Bashir, but then he wouldn't have had his outs with Ross. He couldn't do it for that reason. I thought it played out pretty much as expected. I did think it was a really excellent twist to corroborate everything the two witnesses, Garak and Bashir, said, with the exception of the existence of Section 31. I thought that was a really elegantly done twist to keep sort of that whole thing under wraps, especially with their sleeper agent. Or their with Cabal.
And then what about the escape plan? Was that something that plausibly could have been done? Or what was the signal to transport him out of there? Ross never mentioned that in that sort of end scene with Bashir, only that they transported him out.
Where's he going to go? He has to go back to the Bellerophon. So even when Bashir is back on board and he asks Ross, he still has to tell Ross knows that Sloan is on board. He must be. Where else is he going to go? Unless he transported to some sort of Section 31 ship that was in orbit but it's an interesting scene with this. You've seen the sort of Romulan continuing council and the proconsul is there and, they're interviewing us. And I lost that and I looked at this. So this is kind of the end of Romulus. I've said this before, but this is the start of the end of the Romulan Empire. There are some decisions that get made in canon, and I sort of wonder about if a powerful Romulus had continued to exist, the Tal Shiar, which is still around even after the Obsidian Order on Cardassian is gone, after their joint mission went haywire, the Tal Shiar in the past would never have had a Federation mole at its head. And I think on some level, the Romulan government knows that he's a mole, that he's a plant, that he's treacherous. And I think that's one of the reasons why they say he hasn't been elevated to the continuing council, which is usually a given for the head of the Tal Shiar. They know something's up with him. And so they're keeping his distance. And this is a way of Sloan being like, oh, you could make the whole thing look like the ravings of a lunatic and one traitor, and then I will have saved the Empire, and then I'll be in a position to help you. But this is the beginning of the end of Romulus. Romulus is going to be gone as a physical entity in the series in 30 years from this point. After the supernova, we're starting to see the beginning of the end of the Empire. And it's very interesting. And it starts way back, the moments of it in TNG. I was thinking too, as a separate question, where is Spock in all of this? Because Spock is on Romulus at this moment. He's hanging out under the Romulan capital and he's doing his dissident work to try to bring the Romulans and the Vulcans back together. And you never hear, I've always been curious to know what he's up to on Romulus during the Dominion War. I'm sure there's a book that someone's written about it, but I'd love to have an actual in-episode cameo from him doing something on Romulus at the end of the war. It's always been a sticking point about this episode. I'm like, there's a Federation meeting on Romulus. Where's Spock? He should be there as a dignitary.
I didn't know that.
And I really hadn't appreciated this. Certainly I knew about the end of Romulus, and I had known about what the war had done with the Riemann population and how they had almost revolted or had come to power in a way they never had because they made such sacrifices in the war against the Jem'Hadar. But I hadn't really focused on this as the fulcrum. Okay, let's do a lightning round or whatever round we call it. I'll start off with, this episode certainly worked for me. It was deliciously fun. I love noir. I love seeing Bashir finally not simply admitting, but embracing his genetic enhancement. If you got it, you might as well use it. No reason to pretend you're dumb when you're the smartest guy in the room. Loved Garak talking about being on Romulus as a Cardassian gardener. That was just a little delicious little treat for me. And Murphy, I really had not thought that Garak was specifically warning him off. But now that you say that, and I replay that early scene of the episode in my mind, you're absolutely right. Garak knew something was going to happen.
Yeah.
He may not have known the particulars, but I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic episode. It's one of the best of the series. It's neat because you don't really see any of the other cast. It's kind of just a little play with the sort of characters involved. There's some neat little nods. It's neat to see an Intrepid class ship flying around with DS9 characters on it. I like that. Seeing Voyager out of context, that's kind of cool. Yeah, there's a lot of neat little touches in it. And yeah, that whole thing about Garak at the beginning, it's just like you said, Bashir thinks he's the smartest guy in the room because most times he is. But he's also incredibly naive about other people's motivations. He tends to look at everything through rose-colored glasses, and that's fine. But that's why he ends up making decisions that get him in trouble, like staying behind on a planet full of plague victims and trying to save them and watching most of them die, or trying to heal the Jem'Hadar from Ketracel White. He does these things without thinking them through because he is a good person, but it does get him into trouble. And this is a great way to sort of end that arc in that series. We've seen him do this over and over again. Man.
Just to that point, I thought there was this really lovely kind of mirroring of Bashir in this episode and really early season Bashir, where he's always seen things really black and white. And he's always kind of been an idealist in different ways. And originally, it was about his own prospects and his own career. And I'm going to do this frontier medicine and I'm going to get every woman on the ship. And now I'm going to be the guy who stands up and does what's right. And it's the same exact energy of there's the right way to do things, there's the way things should be, and there's the way things aren't. And I'm going to be solidly on the good side. And that's an easy instrument to play for anyone who wants to. And it has been the whole time. So he's evolved so much as a character, but that core of him is still the same. And I think that's really wonderful. Yeah. And just a note on the Intrepid class ship, I won't pretend to have noticed this myself, but while I was researching for this episode, apparently it's still got Voyager's serial number on it. So they didn't edit the footage they reused closely enough.
Well, it makes sense. They used the mess hall set for the reception. They just broke into the other.
That was fun.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, guys, great episode recap, and I can't wait till we get to our next episode. So till
next time.